Hey neighbors, Kevin here with eTrailer, and today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the MORryde AllTrek 4000 upgraded equalizer kit here on our 2023 Venture RV SportTrek Travel trailer. If you've been towing your trailer for a little bit, or you're just now getting into it and you are experiencing a little bit of issues with the ride quality, maybe you're having a lot of bouncing, maybe chucking front to back a whole lot when you're towing your trailer, then looking at your suspension is going to be one of the best ways that you can fix that issue and have a safer ride quality. Now that we've talked about it a little bit, why don't we get the trailer inside our shop, and then we can get the wheels off and you can take a closer look at all of this that we've done. Just transition our suspension over to our new MORryde suspension, and we can also show you how we got it installed. Now if we look at our normal equalizer here from the factory, this is only going to allow us to transfer that weight back and forth between the two axles so that as we go over bumps in the road, it's not forcing all the weight onto one axle and overloading it. But with that, there is no shock absorption. Now typically when people come to us, they're asking for some kind of shock absorber at the connection to the tow vehicle, when really we could be solving that issue right here at the wheels. With our AllTrek 4000, it has a rubber spring right inside, so this whole portion right here is filled with a big old hunk of rubber, and what that does, along with this 4-inch slot that we have right here, these bolts slip right into that, and then as we have a bump in the road and this starts to compress down onto that spring, it's going to slide right through this slot and allow it to compress, and then the spring's going to force it back out. So as we hit those bumps in the road, what happens is your axles start to push against each other and fight each other, and what's going to happen with our equalizer is it is still going to swing back and forth, but with that rubber spring in the center there, now it's going to butt up against the end of our equalizer and it's going to smack that rubber and try to rebound. So it's going to force that back out so that it's not pushing back on the other axle and causing more vibration throughout the trailer frame up to the tow vehicle. With that spring covering both our front to back action as well as our up and down action, anytime we're hitting those bumps, this is going to give you a much smoother transition and a much more comfortable ride quality. Now if you're thinking about switching out your equalizer and your bolts over to some wet bolts so that you can have a smoother running suspension, what you're going to need to do is take some measurements. So here is our factory equalizer as well as our shackle strap, and what we're going to need to do is measure over from the center of our bolt holes across horizontally, and then as well from that line right in the center of those holes up to the center of our hanger hole, and that's going to give us the height so that we're matching up all of our dimensions. Now if you go too far out, too far in, too tall or too short compared to what you used to have, what you can start to see is now your axles aren't sitting exactly where they were before, so it can throw off the height of your trailer, or it could also force it to where your leaf springs aren't going to be able to go back into the hangers out on the shoulders. When it comes to your your shackle straps, what you're going to want to do is measure from the center of your bolt hole over to the center of the other bolt hole. Now, I have the bolts in it right now. You can still eyeball it. Just be careful. If your shackle straps are worn out and you're feeling them and they're jingling around, then we know that the hole's a little bit oblong, so you might need to kind of guesstimate exactly where you're at. Now, typically it's going to be 2 1/4, which we have right now, or 3 1/8. So pretty easy to guess what you have if yours is a little bit worn out. So there are a lot of other upgraded equalizer options out there on the market. The big difference between this one and some of the others is like with the MORryde CRE 3000, we've put that on a ton of trailers, and it's pretty much the same design, but it just doesn't have that slot so that it has all that travel space for that up and down movement. So if your trailer is real top heavy, maybe you have your trailer raised up higher. So our trailer today has a pretty good ground clearance, so there's a lot of space under here, which means we're forcing all that weight up higher. So it's going to be a lot bouncier on the road, especially if it's lighter. Maybe it's emptied out and he's taking it back to the storage unit and it's just kind of bouncing along the way as he goes down the road. That's where the slot here is going to take up that bounce and provide that better ride quality. Now as far as the installation goes, this isn't hard to do. Honestly, I did it in probably about an hour. The biggest thing is preparation. So getting your trailer lifted up by the frame, having the jacks to do that, having jacks at each axle that are hydraulic so you can move them around, and maybe even having an extra floor jack just in case, because sometimes a lot of this likes to bind up and doesn't really want to get exactly where you need it to for all the bolts to slip through. So that's where it can be a challenge. I would definitely have an extra set of hands with you just to help you out get through it all. But overall, it can be done at home if you have the space and equipment to do so. If you don't, please feel free to reach out and use our dealer locator, which can help you find a shop within your zip code to get these all installed. But with all that said, let's go ahead and show you how we did. So to start out our install, we have lifted up our trailer by the frame, and I've also put some hydraulic bottle jacks under our axles because we're going to need to be able to move these up and down so that we can get our hardware in, especially because as you start playing with this and moving stuff around, the axle will start to flip on you. So you can see right here our shackle straps facing down instead, so that axle is flipped. Having a bottle jack will make this a whole lot easier with all the maneuvering you're going to need to do just to get everything to line up perfectly. Now with that being said, we'll start off. I'm going to be using a 11/16 socket on the nut side of our assembly here. We don't want to try to attack the head of that bolt, because if we look at one of our other bolts, this is going to have splines on it, and those splines bite into our hanger, so we don't want to tear that up, because if this starts to roll inside the hanger, then our whole assembly is going to have too much movement, and you'll start to see it wear into the circle in your hanger, and then it'll get oblong, and then now you're replacing the hanger as well. So always make sure you're going from the nut side of it, and you'll want to also use a wrench on the other side. So on the other side, we're using a 3/4, or at least I was before. So you might find some of your bolt heads might be different. So on the nut side, I am using an 11/16 socket, and on the bolt head side, I'm going to use a 21mm socket. Now, this is different compared to most of the trailers I've worked on, and even from this side over to the other side, it's two different sizes. So I'm assuming the manufacturer just ran out of whatever bolt head size that they were using originally and swapped onto this new one. So you might find yours is a little bit different, but we're going to pop these nuts off. And I'm going to just work my way down. I'm not going to remove my bolts yet, so I'm going to go down to our equalizer and get all of our shackle strap ones off, and then move down to that other hanger bolt. Now with all of these nuts removed, I am going to thread these back on just the hanger bolts. Oop. And then I'm going to hammer them out. It's a little bit easier, it gives you a little bit more room to work with, but I'm only going to thread it on about halfway. And then I'll take my hammer and we'll pop this out. Now typically when you do that, you're going to kind of mar up the threads, so you won't really be able to easily get that back off. I'd use my wrench again, and we can pop it right out. Now with these, when we swap over to our new ones, we're also going to have splines there, and we'll also, with our wet bolt, have a hole in it, because it's going to allow us to grease our assembly so that we can have a much smoother transition as the suspension compresses and rebounds. All right. Shackle straps, typically you can just pop right out. You don't have to hammer on those, but I will on this equalizer hanger as well. There we go. Pop out our equalizer and keep working our way back. So these are coming out super easy, but on older trailers where stuff's really kind of rusted up and corroded, you might also need to have a punch with you. And what you can do is, if you've already hammered it in and you're at a point where you can't hammer anymore with that old flange nut, that's where you come back with the punch and force it out the rest of the way, which I can do right here. Pop right through, and we're good to go. Now the next step is going to be lowering our hydraulic jacks down just a bit so that we can get to the bushings inside of our leaf springs, because we're going to be popping out those old Never Lube ones and switching over to bronze bushings. So just to give you an idea of the difference between our components, when it comes to just the shackle strap bolts or even our hanger bolts, those are also going to have a grease zerk fitting on them. There'll be a hole on one side right about in the middle of the bolt, and that's where all that grease is going to come through, and it'll spread around and lube up our bronze bushings. Now the bronze bushings should last you a lifetime as long as you are routinely performing maintenance on your trailer. The Never Lube bushings that are just made out of nylon, these are typically going to be maybe 5 to 7 years, and you'll start to see them typically wear out. This one isn't too bad. This trailer is only about 3 years old, so it really hasn't sat out for too long. The leaf springs themselves are kind of rusty, but really there isn't too much discoloration or heat transfer through this that would tear it up too much. You will start to see that as it ages though, because these are just made to easily pop out and be replaced, whereas our bronze bushings are meant to last your lifetime. Along with that, we have our shackle straps. So if we look at the standard one, it's about 1/3 the size of our MORryde ones. Now what that means is over time, especially if your bushings start to wear out, the bolt is going to start wobbling in there and you'll see these holes start to oblong. And eventually these will just blow right out. And when that happens, then now your suspension is now loose. You have everything kind of moving in a weird way and things are going to start binding up, and you can typically have your leaf spring snap on you, and then that's where you're now broken down on the side of the road over something that was a couple of bucks. So switching over, getting yourself these MORryde ones, with how thick they are, you'll never have to replace these. There's no way for it to eat through that and tear it up like it does with these standard ones. So with these, you'd be all good to go. Just make sure that since these are wet bolts, you are properly maintaining them and re-greasing them on schedule. So as another example, this is an Equalizer we took off of a different trailer that hadn't been maintained in quite a while. This one wasn't using wet bolts, but as you can see, the nylon bushings just broke right through. Over time, it'll just sit there and wear out. And then if you look over here, the top part that was sitting in our hanger has eaten almost all the way through the Equalizer. So when that happens, you have a whole bunch of up and down play, and then typically the top of your leaf spring coil where the bolts would slip through, that'll usually get flattened down because it's going to sit there and hit the frame over and over and over again. And that's where you start to run into those binding issues, things breaking down, and then it's just going to end up costing you way more money than if you just stuck with that regular maintenance. So to remove your old bushings, they'll typically be stuck in there pretty good. I like to just take a big flathead screwdriver and kind of hammer in a little bit on each edge, and sometimes you can just kind of fold it in, and then once it's all folded in, it's like stiff enough that you can force it through the rest of the way. Other times you'll have one where it was really kind of heated up and then it melts itself into the leaf spring. So it might be a challenge for some, and then others you'll get on there and tap it once and it just pops right out. This is where having that hydraulic bottle jack under your axle is going to be lifesaver, just so now I can lower my eyelet down and actually get to that bushing. Here you can see it kind of melted itself into the portion where the eyelet really kind of meets itself. So this one's fighting me a bit. You might end up just having to kind of rip it off and then scrape this area out with your screwdriver so it's nice and clean for when you put in the next bushing. Once you have all of your nylon bushings out, you can take one of the old bolts, and we're going to use that to hammer in our new bushing. Just like that. And we can pop it out. And I like to feel, I might even give it one more little tap just because I'm a little bit more out on this side. I like to keep it nice and even. There we go. And we'll just do that to the other end of our leaf spring and then also with that front axle as well. On the Equalizer, since we are switching over to the AllTrek 4000, that already comes with bronze bushings in it. So on our shackle straps, we'll just take one of those bushings right off because we're not going to need it. I would just hang on to it. If you ever have an issue later on down the road and you need to replace one, then you already have one available. That way it's not a wait for it and you can easily swap it out right when you're on the road. Yep, just as a second reminder, here are all of our bronze bushings already pressed in, so we don't have to do any work there. But I am going to take one of my wet bolts and a flange nut, and we're going to slot this into our center hanger. We'll pass our bolt through, and now on these bolts, MORryde has said that they want that hole facing upwards so that it can spread that grease properly. So I guess there's a little bit less tension facing up versus facing down on it. So we'll make sure that we face that up as we slot it in. And from there, we're going to need a sacrificial socket to hammer on. So make sure it's an impact so it can handle taking a beating. I like to use a 9/16 because it allows me to cover up the bolt head without accidentally hitting our grease zerk fitting. And this is going to give you more surface area to hammer against too. And we want to make sure that we're getting all the way in so that our bolt head is fully meeting up and those splines are biting into the hanger. Now, if you're having issues, typically if you have an older trailer, kind of is a fight replacing it. So what I like to do is I'll also throw on the flange nut on the backside, and I can tighten that down, and I can kind of crank on that, hammer, crank on that, back and forth until we fully get it to seat. Now, with this being a little bit newer, these are slotting in pretty easy, so I really don't have to hammer too much. And we're already in, so I'm going to leave that a little bit loose right now so that it can go back and forth, because we're going to have to play around with our axle configuration here and kind of get everything seated right, so that way when we go to put in our shackle strap bolts, everything lines up proper. I typically find the outer hanger bolts are the hardest ones to usually line up for me. So since ours is already lined up, I'm going to start with that now. Now I might have to play with it a bit just to get it totally perfect. Fully in. Throw our flange nut on the back side here, and we'll keep working our way back. Before I get too far and don't have an example to show you, when you're tightening these down, these have a shoulder on them so that the flange nut stops, and that's what we're wanting to get to. Once we get to that point, we don't need to tighten it any further. We don't want to over tighten it, and having that shoulder there makes this a whole lot easier, because if you do over tighten the nuts while you're tightening down your suspension, it's going to clamp down too hard with the hangers, and then your suspension won't be able to travel back and forth. All right, I'm going to slot this in, and then we're going to have to fight it with the other side to get it to line up just perfect. But we'll get that on, then we'll stick on the other side of our shackle strap with the MORryde side facing out, and then 2 flange nuts. I'm just doing these hand tight for right now. We'll come back and tighten everything down a little bit later. Give it a little persuasion. Pop on the back side here, and then 2 more flange nuts. Now I'm just running these down with a 3/4 inch ratcheting wrench, just a bit. I'm not to the point where these are tight yet. Just trying to kind of even everything out. It's good to kind of go back and forth between the 2 bolts, just so that these sandwich together straight instead of being kind of crooked. Now, just as an extra precaution, I don't honestly think you could really spin this bolt head in here just with how thick those are, but never take the chance. I'm going to tighten it the rest of the way with a 13/16 wrench out on the bolt head. And now when we do this, we aren't super tight. We're just trying to get it down to that shoulder on our bolt, and that's it. We don't want to go too tight and then have these crunch down on our equalizer and leaf spring eyelet and then not be able to move. So you can see I still got some wiggle room there, so we know we're good. Now that we have this side all tightened down, we can go ahead and repeat the same process over on the other side, and then we'll come back with a pry bar, and I'm going to stick it between the equalizer and our leaf spring eyelet and pry that back up, because right now you can see we're facing down instead of facing up. When you're looking at your equalizer, you should be seeing somewhat of a W shape with the shackle straps. If you're too far out or too far in, that's where you're going to run into bind up issues, or you're just going to have stuff start to wear out a lot quicker on you. Now we'll give this a couple pumps, and I like to see, and I'm already seeing it too, it's over on the other side between the eyelet of our leaf spring and the inside of our hanger. It's already starting to pop out over there, so we know we're good. If you're doing this, you'll want to use a high temp red grease, which you can also pick up here at eTrailer, as well as a grease gun if you don't already have one. And we'll keep working our way through. Now with this all properly lubed up, we can put our wheels back on and then torque down our lug nuts. Now, typically there's going to be a little chart or sticker, something like that, on the passenger side of your trailer that tells you what that setting is going to be. Now, if there isn't that, what you can do is you can look at the diameter of your studs and you can look up exactly what your torque setting would be for that diameter. Well, I think that does it for today's look at and installation of the MORryde AllTrek 4000 upgraded equalizer kit here on our 2023 Venture RV SportTrek Travel trailer. Please reach out to us via our Ask the Experts link, a comment on this video, or a phone call to our customer service department. We'd be happy to help you out.